Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, a podcast that features conversations with speedrunners, developers, content creators, and everything in between. Thank you so much for being here and listening and watching and doing all that fun stuff. I am super excited to kind of unearth a conversation that I was fortunate enough to have with Zallard1 and Sinister1 back in May of last year, 2021. And it's all about Wii Punch-Out. Which Zallard did this amazing run at SGDQ 2019 where he did it all blindfolded. And I was just watching Zallard stream, and this is February of 2022 if you're listening to this at some point in the future. And Zallard was talking about all of his Punch-Out runs and stuff like that. He was playing Punch-Out, Super Punch-Out actually. And he started talking about this SGDQ 2019 run of the game blindfolded. If you have ever enjoyed any little bit of a Punch-Out game, or have the casual, just curiosity about the game, you got to do yourself a favor and watch this run, and also listen to the conversation that we got to have. Sinister was mostly on the couch, so we got it from his perspective, but just to hear kind of all of the things that it takes to actually make something like this happen, and what it takes to go into the run and to make everything like this a possibility. Like, how do you even know that this could be a thing? It's super fascinating and super interesting, and I realized I hadn't shared it yet on the podcast feed. I think you're going to really enjoy it, to get some really insight and some interesting things just behind the scenes on how the whole thing went. So hope you enjoy. This is from Games Done Classic. If you want to view the whole episode, I'll link to that in the show notes in the description. And you can see we talked all about Punch-Out stuff. Summoning Salt joined us on an earlier segment with Zallard and Sinister. And it's a really great conversation. But this is all about Wii Punch-Out. I hope you enjoy. And now Zallard1 and a Sinister1, all about SGDQ 2019. And welcome back to Games Done Classic, where we are looking back at legendary GDQ moments with the legends that made them happen. And folks, we're going to do a bonus here. We've been talking about Mike Tyson's Punch-Out this entire stream and this entire episode. As a little bit of a bonus, it's possible. Okay, this is kind of a selfish thing. I'm just going to be honest with y'all. The blindfolded Wii Punch-Out run that Zallard1 did at SGDQ 2019 is probably my favorite run I've ever seen at a GDQ. And so I asked if Zallard wouldn't mind, and Sinister wouldn't mind sticking on for one more run to go through this, because first of all, it's a really interesting run in that there's not a lot of people who run this game. So I think, I feel like maybe a lot of us had not seen something like this before. And so I guess that's where I kind of want to start, Zallard. Before we'll get into the blindfolded thing, can you describe the Wii Punch-Out community? Are there many people running this game? Are you one of the few? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, with Wii Punch-Out in particular, the origins of it kind of go, it's a little bit similar to MTPO, where people prioritized single fights. Single fights were like the thing that people ran with this game for, years and years. It ended up being that I was the first person to put together something that you would say is a speed run of this game, from start to finish. For the singular purpose of submitting to Speed Demos Archive. And it was just I wanted to see a speed run of this game, and no one had done it. No one had put together all the strategies that the community had found, and I wanted to see it.
It's a real interesting game, and I believe that you had run it at GDQ before, right? I'm not blindfolded, but the speed run of it.
Yeah, so I ran it at AGDQ 2015 with Vision, and that was a fun run in and of itself, but a bit different in being able to see all these So one of the big challenges of this game, and you kind of saw it there, was the motion controls. Every menu in the game requires this pointer that you point to the screen with, but it's something so trivial when you can see, but when you can't, then it becomes this weird dowsing exercise that you're constantly trying to figure out okay, am I on the right line, am I gonna pick the right boxer? And it's really challenging and kind of frightening. In some ways it's scarier than the fights themselves. It is that important.
And I do have a fair amount of questions about all that. If we can take it just one step back really quick, in that, I played through the game now casually. How does the game control or play compared to Mike Tyson's Punch-Out or Super Punch-Out, games you've run before in the series?
So the cool thing outside of the pointer controls is you can take the Wiimote, turn it on its side, and you'll feel right at home. It's just the two buttons, the D-pad, the only thing that's a little bit different is the A button is Star Punch, and that's a little bit closer to the D-pad. So you'll be using Star Punches with your left finger instead of your right finger. But all in all, it controls pretty much as you would expect. There's a couple of differences in terms of movement. In Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and Super Punch-Out, you get this thing called quick dodges, where you just have to press left and up, and it'll make Mac center faster. There's technically a glitch where quick dodges exist in this, but that's like a whole other can of worms, but I should mention it just for completeness sake. But between that and the frame data being more, so like every single dodge and duck are the exact same number of frames as each other, and the same with punches. That makes it really scary for buffer strategies because you're super limited on what you can do. With MTPO and Super Punch-Out, you have, like different dodge types, quick dodges, punches, high and low could have different, numbers of frames that elapse. With this game, if it doesn't fit, a combination of some dodge and some punch, it's not going to work. So there's a whole bunch of just manually timing counters, and if you miss them, then you're kind of in trouble. It really depends on the fight, but it's super scary if you go off script in the later fights in this game.
Which thankfully we're going to get to in a little bit. I want to throw a question out at Sinister, who, I primarily familiar with a lot of your NES speedruns. Did you ever try playing through casually or speedrunning any other games in the Punch-Out series after Mike Tyson's Punch-Out? Like, did you ever play this one or anything like that?
I did play this one. A stream viewer of mine had actually very graciously sent me a Wii with this game because, they want to see me play it on stream. And I tried to get some coaching from Zallard during the stream, I think, because I was struggling, and I think I got to Soda Popinski, and maybe I beat him, maybe I didn't, I don't know, but it was short-lived. Super Punch-Out, yes, I did actually play that quite a bit, and I did speedrun one of the individual levels for that. I actually had a tied world record in one level, but no, I never got to the level that Zallard did in these other games. Zallard basically, he is Mr. Punch-Out, okay? The entire franchise, if there is a Punch-Out game or a game that is meant to be like Punch-Out, like Breakfast Brawl, like Zallard is crushing that game, okay? Check out Breakfast Brawl if you don't know what that is, by the way, it's funny.
The classic that is Breakfast Brawl. So at some point, Zallard, when did you think that you might be able to do what you're doing here? Attempt or a blindfold? I mean, where did this idea come from with this game?
Well, Super Punch-Out had been beaten at GDQ blindfolded. Then MTPO was beaten blindfolded at a GDQ. And for many years, I didn't really want to get to this game because it's way longer than the other Punch-Out games. It's 26 different fights that you have to do. So it's a very daunting kind of run to prepare for a marathon. And I think it was at the start of 2019, I had tried submitting this game to the GDQs, and it didn't quite make it for AGDQ 2019. Probably, if I had to take a guess, due to schedule reasons, because it is, one of the longer games I've ever submitted. And I was very pleasantly surprised when it made it for SGDQ 2019. And that was when it was just like, all right, well, it's time to do the thing. It's time to complete the trilogy.
had you done attempts before? It's like, you know, we know the traditional submitting a game nowadays, and so I assume you had to have done some attempts at this game blindfolded before you submit something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing before I even began to submit this run to GDQs was to kind of verify to myself that yes, I can beat the game blindfolded. And it's more just like, I wanted to make sure that it was consistent enough, so I would find a couple of strategies here and there for some fights that were really, really problematic. Like the refight with Soda Pop is really bad. Aaron Ryan in the refights is pretty bad. Great Tiger. There's a couple of fights where it was just like, if I don't get the optimal strat, then I'm kind of screwed in a sense. Like the refight with Great Tiger is a fight where it's 100% consistent until you make one mistake, and then suddenly it becomes super random, and you need to be able to see to dodge correctly or counter correctly. It's one of those things. That's why I was kind of, you know, constantly going like, hey, this is really bad if I mess up, you know. And everyone's just like, he says that all the time. All right. And it's like, no, really though.
Well, yeah. Can I just add something
please.
to that? Because I think people, if you haven't done these things before, the blindfold runs and stuff like that, it has been kind of almost like a fluke in the way that Zallard has performed in these blindfolded runs of how well he's done in the one chance you get on stage at GDQ, and people are just like, oh yeah, it's probably. But it's like it is so hard, and if you're able to watch in the practice room or see other attempts, then you get a better understanding and appreciation for like, oh wow, there are like a lot of things that can actually go wrong.
Yeah, like I was feeling terrible for this run, like super terrible about it, because I was just like, in the practice room right before this run, I was just like, well, I can't beat, you know, Great Tiger right now. That's not good. Let's try Title Defense Soda Pop. Oh, that's not good. Let's try. All right, well. I'm gonna go on stage in an hour. This is not good. You know, it's just like.
Zal, that's so important to talk about, because I remember bumping into you in the halls before you had done the run, and you were talking to having the nerves and the whole thing, and it was, you know, as a person who's been just a fan of seeing all these things, I was like, oh wow, it's not just a given that you're going to destroy this game.
Oh no.
And, you know, it's almost an unfair, you know, to hold somebody to that standard, because while there's a lot of things that have to happen for this to go right, for this to work. So it made sense that I'm like, no, of course you'd be. I'm not even attempting something like this, but I'm not surprised to hear that it was nerve-wracking, especially if things weren't going the way that you were planning them to go in the practice room.
Yeah, I mean, with how practice was going, I was just like, yeah, this could be the one, you know, like, you know, it was great while it lasted, you know, the flukes of Super Punch-Out and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out going so well, blindfolded like before, but this is it. I'm going to be exposed with this run, and everyone's going to see how it really is. And then it just didn't happen.
Well, that would be, you know, you talked about it here, and I assume that these blindfolded strats, you're pretty much the one coming up with these. I can't imagine anybody else was doing this, the limited amount of runners to begin with this game.
Yeah, so for the most part, I was trying to follow just sort of the basic speed run of sorts, and just kind of, you know, going off muscle memory and just like kind of internal timing in my head for certain punches, you know, and that has like, you know, hit or miss issues, you know, so to speak. And, you know, like for this fight's like a 27-second fight if everything goes right, but I've already made like, you know, a big error, and I'm going to make like a couple of other ones after. And you know, there's a fight here and there that's kind of like that in this run. But yeah, yeah, I was not feeling this run when it was, you know, about time.
We touched upon
for
it.
me to pull it off.
We talked about it for a moment, and it actually reminds me of a question I should ask about the 2-player, 1-controller Mike Tyson's Punch-Out submission. Being that you had never done it or completed a run, how do you end up submitting something like the 2-player, 1-controller? And I'll throw it over to Sinister. If how do you pitch that to part of the submission process and getting a game in, like if you haven't done it yet?
Well, first of all, it was really Zallard's idea that we should do it anyway. So he convinced me, and I said, okay, sure, let's submit it. And I don't know exactly how. I mean, you'd have to get the games committee to tell you what the actual answer is. But I would assume that it, to some degree, that we have built up kind of a level of trust, given our body of work in previous blindfolded gaming endeavors at GDQ, that they were like, yeah, they can probably do that. So they're kind of like blindly trusting us to be able to do it. But then that, again, it comes back to, that's why I, toward the end, as Zallard mentioned, that I had to think about, hey, we might need to cancel this. And then eventually we had to extend the estimate. So yeah.
Yeah, it was funny now that you mentioned that, because I remember exactly when I pitched it to you. It was the airplane ride away from this marathon.
That's right.
Because
oh, wow.
The reason why was at that point, because spoilers, I beat this game without losing a single fight. So it transformed like my goal of like, so I had like kind of this goal that I wanted to hit initially, and it was to beat every Punch-Out game at a GDQ blindfolded. And with this run, I did it. And well, at least as far as like the console games, I haven't done the arcade ones yet. Maybe we'll figure that out later. Maybe, but
there it is. You heard it here first, folks. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
But for this, having gotten the perfect streak through this game, I was just like, let's try beating all the Punch-Outs blindfolded without losing a single fight in a row. So I ended up submitting Super Punch-Out to GDQ Express right after this run. I believe it was the 2019 one, yeah. And I did the same thing there, and then the 2-player 1-controller one happened, and completed the goal. It's all done.
Goal achieved. Clage, once again on the couch, mentioned something at the beginning of this run that it has now become kind of the staple here, where it's you need to hear the audio, so asking the audience to keep it quiet during the fights. But he alludes to, and you mentioned it too, how important the audio cues are in this game. Are they even more important than some of the previous blindfolded runs we had seen? Because that seems like a big aspect of this whole thing.
Yeah, so in this game, it's funny because you would think that there's more audio cues for this game, and there kind of is in some respect, but some of the comfortable audio cues from previous Punch-Outs are absent. So like when you throw a punch and it whiffs, you can't hear it, or it's like so like minutely there. It almost just feels like sounds like wind. It's so particular, and that's why I was just kind of like, yeah, I need to hear like everything. So, and that comes into play with a couple of other fights where like, maybe the opponent would be like yelling or something. And it's like, but I need to hear this kind of, quiet punch noise in the midst of all this like noise pollution. So it's a bit terrifying, and it's just like, trying to like hone in on these particular sounds and try to like tune out everything else, if that makes any sense.
We had just watched it on screen, and you've mentioned it already, but I think it can't be understated how important menuing is to the blindfolded run. It's actually one of the things that seems to ends up being one of the most challenging things. What makes the menuing so challenging during a blindfolded run like this?
Well, with the practice that I've had with the menus, there's just a lot that you need to remember and make sure to avoid. Like, some screens will have some buttons in different spots. Like let's say, I think it's at the end of the contender, which is like the first half of the game. when you beat Sandman, which is the final fight of the first half, there's going to be like the 3 boxers that you could highlight, an arrow that's kind of under the right boxer that points to the middle to go to Sandman, because it's like 5 boxers in the final circuit. And then you have 3 buttons on the bottom that are like options, continue, and back. And it's like, if I hit anything incorrectly, then I have to be like, oh God, okay, all right, I didn't hit the right thing. What do I think I hit? And, try to navigate backward to get back to that point and do that. I've had a couple of scenarios where if I go into options, I've had to unblindfold and get out of options like that. So that's why there's like a very close call at one point. I think it's the title defense Dawn fight, where I almost hit the options button, and everyone, because I told my my commentators, at least Mecha and Clage, about like, yeah, options are bad. You never want to see me in options. So they knew the threat of it.
I remember that being a big part of this, and if I could be misremembering this, but I believe your TV was turned off too in front of you, like you was blindfolded as it can get. Is that accurate? I can't remember.
So this is from secondhand stuff, because someone had taken a picture of what the setup looked like. It was a laggy, apparently, monitor where it was like all stretched out and terrible, but like it was for the couch. And it was to the point where, like, at least, what Mecha and Clage were telling me, it was to the point where if I were to look at it, it probably would have messed me up harder than if I had just been blindfolded.
Right.
So yeah.
There's actually a great question in the chat, and we should actually address this, because this game does have some slightly different mechanics that we saw in all of the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. And the question was, how come the star KO punches and sometimes the TKOs, like what are some of the differences with the way that the star punches, and why are some boxers going down at moments that, their energy is getting fully drained and everything? How does this work? Right.
So this game, I mean, there are instant knockdowns in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, but they're a little bit different. In this game, there's like certain opportunities that are kind of hidden, where if you use a star punch at a very specific time, or if you punch a very specific frame window, opponents can go down in one hit. And it's more just like a trial and error thing of like trying to figure out like what's what. At least for me, all this stuff has been, found out years and years ago by several people, including myself. I found a couple of these back when the game came out, even. Funnily enough, Jack Wedge found the most, and I hadn't really realized why he was so good at finding punch-out strategies until way later, when it was like, oh, he's speedrun, MTPO, and Super Punch-Out in the super old days. So it kind of came full circle in being like, he's come back to give us the final solution for Tyson.
Good old Jack Wedge. You can always count on him.
Yeah. But yeah, so at least with this game, when, like, let's say, sometimes there's punches that you throw where they'll just be instantly KO'd, and that's just kind of a mechanic in this game. And it's on a fight-by-fight basis.
When I played through the game casually, I had 1 or 2 of them, and it seemed like it occurred to me randomly. But then seeing you play the game, it seems like there were some setups that had developed or created or had been discovered that where you could find some consistency, and even more so through a blindfolded run. Were there any that you tried to hit that you didn't get, where you had to try something, account for that or try a different strat?
Yeah. So there is. It's kind of funny because this ended up being like something that backfired so badly, and it's the refight with Bald Bull. I was so greedy. I was trying to go for like a sub-minute fight. There's actually a strategy you can do where you can carry 3 stars to the bull charge and KO him instantly with that. But in practice, I was just like, nah, no, I'm getting sub-minute like every time. I'm gonna just try that instead. It'll be hype. And then it was hype, but it was a different reason. It was just like, oh God, he's gonna lose. This is it. This is the big one. He's not gonna make it. And I just pull just like a total win out of nowhere on that fight, and it is weirdly the most memorable part of the run for a lot of people.
It really is, because we understood what was going on. At least that's the way I felt in the audience. And somebody who wasn't familiar with the speedrun, I'm like, oh, this how is this happening? You did a good job of selling us that, and not selling us, but it was the truth that how, this could really go wrong really quickly. So,
yeah, I guess it's sort of like the peak in like, oh, he's not lying though.
Yes, it's really, he's not kidding, folks. I have to ask, because this comes up quite often about the couch experience and what it's like to sit on the couch while you're watching some of these things. Sinister, I guess my first question would be like, was it nice to actually finally watch one of these as opposed to having to go through the stress of performing at this level?
Well, yeah, I've been very fortunate that I've been on the couch for Zallard's AGDQ 2014 Super Punch-Out, for this run, for his Games Done Quick Express Super Punch-Out race against Hootie that he mentioned. Yeah, pretty much all of Zallard's Punch-Out related runs. I've been lucky enough to have a front row seat. And, hey, if you haven't seen any of them, you might want to go watch because they're all amazing. So,
absolutely incredible. Yes.
Yeah, it's nice to just sit back and watch the man work and just be like, yeah, that's not supposed to happen. This is insane. Like, just to to be like, oh yeah, like what I accidentally got a frame perfect counter, stuff like that. Yeah. You're just like, accidentally. Okay, he's got this.
When you're prepping for that couch seat, did you watch Zallard do any of this before? Like, had you, what's kind of some of the research or some of the things you had to do to prep to be able to at least hopefully speak somewhat, knowledgeable on the game?
Well, actually, I don't think I had to say very much for this one. I really think that Zallard had gotten Clage and Mecha very well prepared to talk about it. And I'm not nearly as familiar with this game anyway. So for me, it was really just kind of taking it in. And Zallard was, nice enough to invite me to be able to get a front row seat. So I was like, heck yeah, I want to check this out. Let's go.
Don't want to miss that. Did you have to, Zallard, did you have to prep commentary at all with Mecha and Clage? Like, there were some things that needed to be said and stuff like this for, like, the performance standpoint so we could understand what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, constantly I was showing them, like, here's what happens when things go wrong. So, all of that obviously didn't really come through. But
yeah, it was all just wasted time.
Wasted
energy.
Yeah. But, I had them prepared in case, like something went wrong. Like I missed, the Hippo KO in the refight, or like, I had them be prepared like, oh yeah, he's restarting on Great Tiger because this part's random and this stuff is, you can't really do it blindfolded if you mess up once. And it's just like, well, just scrap that. Move on to the next fight to talk about, oh, he just, all right. It's just kept happening like that.
There's an interesting note from Railgun again, once again, behind the scenes that that you were so far underestimate, they were actually concerned that the next runner might not be around to get in on time. They might be chilling somewhere, so they might have to fill some time. So if that's not a compliment, I don't know what it is. But
I should have just pulled out Doc Lewis's Punch-Out because it never gets in, and I should have just done that real quick and just been like,
that was the chance.
That would have been the.
You missed your opportunity.
I missed it.
You guys mentioned during the MTPO 2-player 1 controller that you had really only completed run of it before doing it on the stage. How many times had you completed this run at this point? Because I assume at some point there was an estimate, so you got to figure out if that's. But how many runs had you completed?
With this, it was quite a bit of a handful, but none of them were perfect. That's the thing. None of them had no losses. So it was kind of a similar situation where it's just like this exceeded all expectations, and I didn't,
Zallard is clutch, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't picked up on that so far, when it's showtime, he's on.
Zalad, is there? I know it's tough to like quantify that into words and stuff like that, but what's the difference when you get there on stage? Because there is something about that you seem to be able to find that gear and do the thing. And is it an adrenaline? I mean, maybe you could, is there any way to verbalize why that happens while you're on stage there?
I don't really know. Like it's so weird because I'm just like on stage, just being like, yeah, I'm terrified. Yeah, I'm gonna do bad. And then I don't meet that low expectation by doing the complete opposite, and it just keeps happening. I don't know. Dude.
Well, I do. I think that's one thing I want to really drive home, and that especially because after bumping into you that hallway that one time, like it's not BS. You're really concerned that things could go horribly wrong, and it's like because they do.
I can confirm this. Okay, I've been around Zallard ahead of a lot of these runs, ones that we've shown and ones that we haven't, and he is usually like very concerned about how it's about to go. And in fact, before our 2 players 1 controller run, it was like this stark contrast where I'm like laying down with headphones on, listening to music, trying to get in the zone. And Zallard's like, oh man, this isn't going to go well. Like, we get this Macho and this and Tyson. And like, it's just so funny. And then all of a sudden he sits down and it's just like, boom. It's like he's a different person all of a sudden. He's just like, yep, I got this. No problem. Crushing everybody.
It's just still an amazing thing, and I think that's why so many people speak so fondly of these runs that we've seen from and from both of you, to be honest with you, about what the blindfolded and the level of skill it takes to do so, and also the RTA runs of it. I'm going to skip ahead here, and I do want to touch upon a little bit briefly before we wrap, before we finish, about the title defense and what makes that so. What makes title defense, first of all, challenging as a speed run without the blindfold, and then actually adding that extra element. Could you maybe perhaps describe or tell us a little bit about those details?
Yeah, so title defense is well, at least for the speedrun, it's one of those things where it's like, did you hit the strategy? No, then reset. And it's just like the one like saving grace about this run is that it's like 99% not random if you do everything right. So, there's that element of like, okay, I know he's going to do this. I know he's going to do that. I know the timing for this. I know the timing for that. So it's like, a lot of these fights are just like, he's just winning. I don't know. But then, when you finally see me mess up something, it's just like, I'm panicking. Like, I think for title defense Soda, I think I did, what was it? I missed 1 punch, or like I mistimed something, and I was just like, oh no, the punch pattern's going to be different. Like, everything's going to go wrong. And then it didn't. And then with title defense Bull, it's like, well, I don't know what he's doing now. He's doing a lot of uppercuts, apparently. I can hear it because Mac is on the ground. It's just like, it's, as long as everything goes right, it's all good. One thing goes wrong, then it's bad. So,
you mentioned, we talked about it a little bit, about some of the things that did go wrong. And let's start with, had you had those happen in practice where you at least knew how to kind of deal with it in a certain way, or were you just planning on restarting the fight? What was like the game plan to kind of approach that?
So what I was doing was I was throwing down like intentional mistakes. Like, I think I'm going to make this mistake, so let's find a strategy to branch off of if that happens. So I was doing that a lot, and it's, almost none of that really came into this run. And of course, like, in practice, I'm like super consistent on title defense Bull. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't need backups for this apparently. And then I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So it was really just like me kind of like scraping the bottom of the barrel of like, I remember this part of this fight a little bit. So I predict that he's going to do this. And then, he doesn't. And, every once in a while I get it right. But yeah.
I have seen you from time to time continue to run this game since seeing you perform it here at GDQ 2019. Is it a game you keep coming back to, similar to the are there things you'd still like to do with the game at this point, RTA or blindfold or something like that?
Yeah, I haven't done single segment runs of this since like 2014, which is a very long time ago. I'd like to improve my PB on that eventually, but it's, like I kind of want to get through some of the aisles a little bit before I consider that. But I think it would be interesting to see like what the run could be like for me if, I implement the newer things that have been found since.
I've seen this comment come up a couple of times in chat, and I've seen it before where we love certain games and we're not always quite sure why they're not as popular as other games are. And I can say one of the things that's interesting about the Punch-Out series in general is that they're some of the most highly viewed videos on GDQ's YouTube channel. The room, I don't know if you can tell, but the runs that I've been in the room for, packed. You can't find a seat. A lot of people standing, things like that. There is something that is so enjoyable about watching and being a part of the experience of seeing this, that not necessarily everyone wants to go and actually try doing the thing itself, because you see people like yourself and Sinister One performing at such a high level. I have to imagine, being that you guys have all been in the room now for all of these runs, I mean, they're some of the most popular runs I see, like just as far as like attending to watch. I assume you got to notice some of the crowd as this is happening, right?
Yeah, I mean that definitely. It's funny because at first, it always makes me nervous. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of people, But I put on the blindfold. It's like I can't see no people no more.
Right.
It's just the game.
It helps having it's actually one advantage of having the blindfold is that it kind of helps you to tune out everything else around you versus being in the room. Because, for those of you that haven't done a run at Games Done Quick, like there's a lot going on the stage. There's like a bunch of TVs. There's this, there's that. There's the people, there's the tech people in the background. Like there's a lot of kind of distractions and stimuli going on. So the blindfold kind of just shuts all that off. You're able to just focus on your audio cues, your commentators, hear the crowd, and that's it. But yeah, the rooms do definitely get packed for these runs. I remember one of the best parts of our run in 2020 was like when we did finally get to take the blindfolds off and we both kind of stood up, and when we like looked and it's like, whoa, this room is really full.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Easily say standing room only, and hearing the crowd come to life. That's one of those things where, especially during this run, but being all of them, you're asked to stay quiet, and when you're finally allowed to get that release and to cheer and stuff like that, it's been building up at certain points, for minutes and for what feels like a long time. So it's nice to let you all know how we feel about what we're seeing out there and stuff. And this game was no different. It's just kind of indescribable. And there's Clage giving the okay. Yes, now you can clap. When you're prepping for something like this, I assume that you had to spend the most amount of time on title defense, or is it do you have to spend an equal amount of time, trying to make sure you understand all the runs?
Yeah, so it's definitely a thing where you kind of need to focus on the fights that are, a critical danger to your run. For me, in this run, the first half of the game is pretty easy. I think there's like only 2 fights that even really pose a problem, and it's Tiger, because he's got like directionally dependent things that you have to keep in mind, and the number of times you punch manipulates what he does. And what else is it? I think. Oh, Aaron Ryan, because it's hard for me to hear, and if I don't get all 3 of the stars, then the KO doesn't work. So those were really the 2 that I practiced the most out of the first half. The rest I kind of didn't really care so much. I think maybe like I practiced Sandman a little bit, but the rest was just kind of like muscle memory that's built up over the years. So I could kind of wing that part.
So we talked about it earlier, and I think because we're on the fight now, like what happened here? What makes this so interesting? And it just seemed like it surprised you, or it seemed like a moment during this fight, the Hippo fight, the second title defense fight.
So similar to Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, you need to punch him early when he opens his mouth. Otherwise, you don't get enough hits in. And this is a super scripted fight where you need him at an exact hit point value before you throw this star. And you need to like collect another star. And if you don't have that exactly when he does this, then you can't KO him. So it's one of those things where it's like, if I made one mistake, if I threw one punch too early, if I didn't hit, the early counters like every time, then, it'd be an issue. But, when it all lines up, it does.
Total side note, why is that a KO and not a TKO in this game?
So it's, I don't know, like it's a thing with Hippo where when you knock him down once, he doesn't get back up.
Homage, perhaps, back to the
pretty
the
much,
NES.
yeah.
Jeez. I'm looking back at it now, and all the good thoughts and the memories are coming back. You mentioned how much prep you put into it and the nerves that go into it. Do you finally get a chance when it's all over to enjoy the moment a bit? Because I know there's hours now. At this point, I assume hundreds, maybe not thousands of hours that go into prep. Do you ever get a chance to enjoy the moment? I'll ask Zallard first, but I'm also curious to hear about Sinister as well.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, so I want to say when I did the Super Punch-Out run 2014, that one was weirdly one of the most tense because it was later in the week. That was on Friday. So most of the event was me just being, like stressing out about my run, and Sinister probably had a similar thing, with stressing out about his run because he was taking it very seriously that year. But it felt like every time after that, these runs were scheduled super early. Like, I think this run was on like a Monday or a Tuesday or something. So it's just like, oh, I get to get it out of the way like immediately and just enjoy the rest of the week with friends,
Absolutely.
So yeah, I totally am super happy and relieved after these runs are finished and it's in the past.
Sister, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you got to try to take in the moment a little bit because you don't know how many times you're going to get this opportunity to be on the stage, and I think 2014, I that one still stands out to me because the crowd was it was so electric. The energy, I could just feel the energy of the crowd each time I won a fight, and that was just really special. That's like something that I'll never forget. So it's really a great memory.
It's something you mentioned about the video from 14, but it's something that while it doesn't quite, I'm sure it's not the same as being there. Watching it live was like this incredible thing as well. Like it felt like a very communal experience, like something we hadn't seen before because we hadn't seen it go down like that before. So it's I completely agree with you, and I'm glad to hear that at some point you do get a chance to enjoy it a bit. What's the quickest time you had gotten before you actually got on stage?
For this run, gosh, I'm trying to remember. It was, well, let's see here. I think I got like a 1:10 or 11 or something on this run, and I think, what did I say? It was like 6 minutes lower than that was my PB.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it was something around there, and it was definitely one of those runs where it's just like, went to round 2 on this character, or like, lost on this character,
Right. It's one of those things where it just kept getting more and more impressive, which was a lot to say at this point because you mentioned it's 26 fights and we're knee deep into it at this point, and it doesn't slow down. It just kept going and going and going.
Yeah, it's just so much,
Right.
Like mentally, it's just like, all right, we made it through this fight. Let's try to recall everything from practice for this one, and just on and on and on. And it feels like, I remember being kind of like fatigued, like near the end of this, because it was just so long and,
Sure.
so relieved to have it all done.
This is one of those things. The VOD's definitely available on YouTube and Twitch. And I'm not. Is there anything else we're missing from the fight? Because we've been talking now for almost 3.5 hours. I'm sure you're drained by this point. Is there anything else that, behind the scenes or anything that you may want to just share, or something that I might have missed before we start wrapping this thing up?
It's hard to say. Like I feel like pretty much everything's been covered at this point.
It's one of those things. I keep saying it's one of those things, folks, that you really, we have never seen things like this, and this is one of the things that GDQ is. So many people I hear where, man, the Punch-Out blindfolded runs are just something that I'm never going to forget, and I very much fall into that boat where it's definitely one of the things that got me into enjoying this. And even, I know it sounds in a strange way, but when you see somebody do something like this blindfolded, you're like, maybe I could try a normal speed run by itself. And I don't know if I've ever would have done that had it not been for what you all did, 2011, 10, all these 14, the years before. So pretty darn awesome. And I'm glad you continue to do it. As a viewer and a fan, super thankful and fun to watch all these things we've gotten a chance to see. Do you think, Zalad, you may ever return to Punch-Out Wii?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about like blindfolded, but I feel like this, I can't top this run ever in my life. So, I'm happy with just crossing that off the list, but I think, like going for other records would be pretty cool. I mean, I've been messing with ILs with this game for a little bit, but I kind of got side railed by the whole Sinister Tyson bet thing. So, I imagine whenever I complete a fight of Tyson with the uppercut, I'll probably come back to this. We'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling by then.
It's a pretty great game, and I'm glad that even though I know you've been dealing with some illness over the past months now, I appreciate the fact that you are streaming those attempts and giving it a go, because there is something I know at some point you all are going to get tired of this game, but there is just something special about seeing you grind Punch-Out attempts, whether it's Mike Tyson or whether it's this game or Super Punch-Out. It's one of those things where you've been doing it now for so long. It'll never get old watching, man. So thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you.
If we're gonna start wrapping it up there. If people do want to watch some of your attempts and see some of these things happen live, where can they find you, Zallard?
So you can find me at youtube.com/Zallard1 or twitch.tv/Zallard1. I'm this name like everywhere now. So.
And I will throw the same over to Sinister One. Where if people want to see your attempts, I know. What are you speedrunning right now? Anything fun going on?
Well, I've become a chess streamer now. So if you like the game chess and you want to see somebody that's kind of a bit of a beginner progressing through the ranks, then come check me out. I'll still do some gaming though. Twitch.tv/Sinister1. That's the number one, like it's hopefully spelled on the screen there.
Yeah.
And then also same youtube.com/Sinister1. I would like to just add one other thing,
please,
because we didn't get to touch on this. So if you don't mind,
no, absolutely.
The whole idea of blindfolded speedrunning has really grown tremendously in ways that I would have never imagined. And if you actually go and look on YouTube or wherever you want, you'll see there are runs for games that you'd be like, how on earth could they beat that game blindfolded?
Yeah.
And, like Super Metroid or Link to the Past, games like this. And it's just, it's really crazy. So I think in future GDQs, eventually you're going to see more and more of these mind-blowing blindfolded runs coming out. So
yeah,
something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's important to point that out because I think it was the last GDQ, AGDQ, where Bubsia, who is like ridiculous at blindfold, he does like dozens and dozens of blindfolded games like they're nothing. He's got like setups for pretty much everything. He did Super Mario 64 16-star blindfolded.
Yeah, that was a great one. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh wow. It's
there's a website that they have. I would feel remiss to not plug it.
Please.
In their Discord.
And while you're looking for it, the chat is asking, chess blindfolded when, Sinister?
Oh, I've got a little ways to go. I know that it is something that's done. I mean, a lot of the best chess players throughout history have done blindfolded exhibitions where they're not only playing one person, they'll be playing like 8 people blindfolded at the same time. So this is, that takes blindfolded to a whole different level. I'm just trying to learn how to, move the pieces correctly and not lose the game first. And maybe one day we'll get some blindfolded games going.
Okay, got
Absolutely.
it.
Go for it.
I'm gonna post it in chat. Is blindfoldedgaming.com. So this is like a repository for like every completed blindfolded run, whether it's like partial or completely. It's fascinating stuff. Just like look through there and be just shocked at how long this list of games is. It goes on and on.
It's wild to see that that's what's happened, and it wouldn't have happened had you all not tried doing some of these things, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. That's wild that it's become a thing. I mean, we see it as categories. These are things you could actually submit nowadays. Mm-hmm. So wild. So cool. The link's blocked, but we can include it. Yeah, no, it's totally. You mentioned it. That's an easy way for people. Can you say the link again, Zallard?
Yeah. So I guess like I couldn't post it because I'm not mod, but it is blindfoldedgaming.com. So it should be pretty easy to find. You can probably Google it, and it'll be like the first thing you see.
And what a great way to wrap this up. Thank you both for being here and reliving these moments with us, because I think it's fair to say GDQ would not. I'm sorry. Let me take that back. Speedrunning, the community may not be what it is today without some of these really memorable moments from the GDQ stage. So thank you both for being here. Really do appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening, watching, viewing, liking, subscribing, and sharing. All of that stuff goes a long way to helping out the podcast. If you'd like any additional info, you can go to sequencebreakpodcast.com. All of our past episodes, everything's on there. You'll find everything there. If you'd like to watch live, follow the Sequence Break Twitter. That is Sequence Break PC, and you can join in, ask some questions, watch the whole thing live. It does happen. It's not really a set time, but I do post when I go live. Everything else, if you have any questions or anything like that, podcast@sequencebreakpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.